Term sheets, one of the most exciting and one of the most dense and mystifying topics for startup founders. These are your keys to the kingdom. This unlocks the next phase of your startup journey. This is how you level up, but you need to understand what you are signing. Super dense topic. I don't think this will be my most viewed video. I think I'd be getting a lot more views if I were just like talking about the Amber Heard trial or whatever. But I think even if 10 people watch this and get value out of it, I really think it will affect your startup journey. I think it'll make you a better entrepreneur. And if that happens, I'm happy. This is such a dense topic that after editing the video, I realized it really should be 2 videos. So in this first video, we talk about what are term sheets, what are some of the major forks in the road, and then we start delving in on some of the really meaty topics of term sheets like dilution. If you don't know what I mean, just watch the video and enjoy. Without further ado, here's part 1 of the term sheet 2-part video, which is part of the larger playlist of the Startup Legal Guide. Please remember to click like and subscribe to help keep legal education accessible for entrepreneurs. Enjoy. Hello, we're back with more Startup Legal Guide. Today we're going to talk about term sheets and the terms or the provisions that you'll commonly see in term sheets, making sense out of all of these legal terms. So, you've received a term sheet. Congratulations. Or maybe you're just watching this to educate yourself for the future when you hope to receive a term sheet, in which case, good on you. What do all these terms mean? What can you expect to see in your term sheet? What are some of the pitfalls? What's all this legal mumbo jumbo is what I'm saying. Let's dive in. So before I start defining the terms within a term sheet, why don't I define what a term sheet is itself? A term sheet is a document that outlines the key points of a transaction and is evidence of the party's intent to actually engage in and consummate that transaction. They have what we call moral force. You know, you can take a reputational hit if you back out on a term sheet, but typically they are not binding in all of their terms. Rather, they are just a high-level overview and sort of a statement that you intend to commit to each other. Think of it like more like an engagement than a wedding. So what are some of the terms within a term sheet that you need to know? Well, the first thing you need to know is whether it is actually binding or non-binding. While the general idea of a term sheet is that they will be non-binding, they can be binding. It just depends on their specific language. And even specific terms within a term sheet can be binding while others are not, or perhaps you'll have the overall term sheet is not binding, but specific provisions are. So this video is not meant to replace legal counsel. This is to help you bone up on what some of the terms mean, but you really, if you're at the point of receiving a term sheet for investment for your company, hire a lawyer. But also know what the terms mean yourself so that you're not just kind of like passively following along with what the lawyer is having you do, because the lawyer might not know your goals or what's really important to you. So therefore, it's important for you to understand these terms so you can communicate with your lawyer and make sure you really get what you want. Okay, so that's the first big thing to look out for is the term sheet binding? Is any part of the term sheet binding? The second big term you need to know, liquidation preference. So this is something that can be a very unpleasant surprise to founders later on in the game if you don't know what you're getting yourself into on the front end. A liquidation preference is a right that you are giving to your investors to receive their money back first. So say that your investor gives you $1 million and then you sell your company for $1 million. If they have a 1x liquidation preference, meaning they get 1 times their original investment back first, well then you're not going to get anything out of that transaction because they're going to recover their $1 million and then all the money from the proceeds of the sale is gone. So that's a 1x liquidation preference. It is also possible to have a greater multiple than 1x. I mean, you can have a 10x liquidation preference. If you see that in your term sheet, definitely know what you're getting into before you sign anything or before you consummate that deal. And if you are in the wonderful position of having multiple term sheets presented to you, this is one of the biggest ways you'll want to compare the offers. Don't just look at valuation and amount of investment, also look at the liquidation preference and think long term about how that could affect you down the road. Dividends. It's very common at Series A and beyond to issue preferred stock to investors. So out there in the world, outside of the startup world, preferred stock typically means that they receive dividends but don't have voting rights, whereas common stock may or may not receive dividends but does have voting rights. Forget that for startup world. For startup world, it's less likely to have to pay dividends to stock holders because people are investing in you not to receive dividends next month or next year. They're doing it to hit a home run and have an exit and receive a huge return on their original investment. So they want the money that they've invested in you to be reinvested into the business so that you can grow it, hit a home run, have an exit, not so that you can be paying dividends to them. So paying dividends is much less common for preferred stock, but what you might see is a term where you're giving preferred stock to the investors, and what they're requiring is that common stock does not receive dividends if preferred stock also isn't receiving dividends. A dividend is a payment that you make to your investors or to your shareholders on an annual or quarterly basis, by the way. Conversion. You might see in the term sheet that preferred stock will be converted into common stock on certain events, like if there's an IPO, for example. It's very common to see preferred stock lumped in with the rest of the common stock, and then that will be either the exit for the investors or they'll continue to hold common stock in your newly public company someday. Dilution. It probably goes without saying that one of the biggest things you're looking for in a term sheet is how are they valuing the company? What's the valuation of the company? What percentage of equity are they going to take for their price? And are they valuing, when you're looking at the valuation of the company, you're saying, is that pre or post money investment? And then that affects the pretty simple math equation of what proportion of the company ownership they're taking in exchange for the investment money they're giving you. But a slightly more nuanced dilution issue is the stock option pool. So you're going to set aside a certain amount of your equity, a certain amount of the ownership of the company into a stock option pool so that you can then give stock option to your current employees or your future employees. So you're going to set that aside. And here's the question. Is it done before you receive the money, where that pool is carved out from just your ownership of the company? Or are you setting aside the employee stock option pool after you receive the money so that that pool of ownership is taken partially from your portion of the ownership and partially from the investor's portion of the company, right? So look at the employee stock option pool. Is that pre or post investment? When is that employee stock option pool created? Another dilution type issue is anti-dilution protection provisions in a term sheet. Price-based anti-dilution protection. Say that again. Price-based anti-dilution protection. This is a protection for the investor. And if you see this term in your term sheet, what it's saying most likely is that, you've got to read what it actually says. But typically what this provision says is that, say you raise money at Series A and you've got a term sheet with a price-based anti-dilution protection for the investors. Say you raise at a valuation of $10 million. And then your next round of fundraising, your Series B, is at a valuation of like $8 million. You've gone down. The price of the stock has gone down. Therefore, the value of the ownership has gone down, and a Series A investor will feel like they have overpaid. But if they have a price-based anti-dilution protection in the term sheet and then the subsequent documents consummating your relationship, then what they can do is retroactively essentially take down the price of what they paid, which it doesn't mean that you give money back to them. It means that then for the amount of money they gave you, they can now own a greater proportion of the company based on the subsequent, the later, lower valuation. All right, so that was part 1 on term sheets. If you made it all the way through and you understood everything I said, congratulations. But your princess is in another castle. Please join us in part 2 of term sheets for startups, all part of the Startup Legal Guide. Please remember to click like and subscribe, and I'll see you in part 2.